September 26, 1983. A bunker near Moscow. The sirens are screaming start. 5 nuclear missiles are headed for the USSR. Stanislav Petrov has 20 minutes to decide if humanity ends. His computer says reliability high. The protocol is simple: retaliate, destroy. But Petrov pauses. He feels a funny feeling in his gut. This wasn't a glitch in the machine. It was a glitch in the psychology of fear. Welcome to Psyche of Power. Today, we dismantle the Cold War, not as a series of battles, but as a collective psychological breakdown. How did the world become a hostage to the neurosis of 2 men? For 40 years, we lived in the golden age of paranoia. This is the story of mutually assured fear. To understand the Cold War, you don't need a history degree. You need to understand the amygdala, the brain's panic button. Act 1, the architecture of enmity. It began not with a border dispute, but with a psychological phenomenon called hostile attribution bias. The Soviets were Uncle Joe, and the Americans were the arsenal of democracy. Then, the common enemy died. In psychology, when the external threat vanishes, the brain seeks a new one to maintain its internal coherence. Harry Truman suffered from an insecurity complex. He followed the giant shadow of FDR. He had to prove he was tough. Stalin, meanwhile, was a textbook case of clinical paranoia. He didn't just suspect his enemies. He suspected his friends of suspecting him. When 2 leaders with deep-seated insecurities meet, they don't see a partner. They see a mirror of their own darkest intentions. This is where we introduce our first psychological concept, the Abilene Paradox, developed by Jerry B. Harvey. The Abilene Paradox occurs when a group collectively decides on a course of action that no individual member actually wants. Neither Truman nor Stalin truly wanted a global nuclear standoff, but both believed the other did. They drove to Abilene, the wasteland of the arms race, because they were too afraid to admit they were terrified. By 1949, the Soviet Union had the bomb. The psychological safety of the ocean for America vanished overnight. This leads us to our first cognitive reversal. You think the arms race was about power. No, it was about terror management theory, TMT. TMT suggests that when humans are reminded of their inevitable death, they cling harder to their cultural worldviews, nationalism, ideology, religion. The more the bomb threatened to vaporize us, the more we needed to believe our side was the only moral reality. We weren't building missiles to win. We were building them to distract ourselves from the fact that we were already dead. The irony: the more security we built, the less safe we felt. A feedback loop of escalating dread. 3 minutes in, here is the first reversal. The Cold War wasn't a fight for dominance. It was a fight to see who could hide their fear the best. Act 2, 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The moment the amygdala of the entire world hijacked the brain. Khrushchev was a gambler. In psychological terms, he suffered from the illusion of control. Kennedy was the rationalist, but he was trapped in a zero-sum game. This was the Madman Strategy, coined by Thomas Schelling. It suggests that if you can convince your opponent you are insane, They will back down. To be rational in the Cold War, you had to act completely irrational. You had to look your enemy in the eye and say, I am crazy enough to kill us both. But here is the psychological twist: what happens when both sides use the Madman Strategy. Inside a Soviet submarine near Cuba, the crew thinks the war has already started. They are out of contact. They are overheated. They are oxygen deprived. Two officers want to fire the nuclear torpedo. One man, Vasily Arkhipov, says no. Why did he say no? In that moment, Arkhipov experienced a break from de-individuation. De-individuation is when you lose your personal moral compass because you are part of a group or a machine. Arkhipov regained his self at the exact moment the world was losing its mind. The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't solved by diplomacy. It was solved by a near-death experience. Psychologically, when an individual survives a near-death event, they often experience a perspective shift. The small things don't matter anymore. For a brief moment, the two leaders looked into the abyss and realized the abyss didn't care about capitalism or communism. Second reversal. We think the crisis was the height of the war. Actually, it was the moment the leaders realized they were both slaves to a system they couldn't control. But the fear didn't die. It just moved inward. Welcome to the era of the panopticon. Act 3. The psychological toll of living in a world where your neighbor is a spy and your TV is a weapon. The Stasi in East Germany didn't just want to watch you. They wanted to decompose you.
Zersetzung.
Zersetzung was a psychological warfare technique designed to destroy a person's confidence and social standing without ever touching them. This created a state of hyper-vigilance. When the enemy is everywhere, the self disappears. In the West, the CIA was experimenting with LSD and mind control. Why? Because they were terrified that the Soviets had cracked the code of the human soul. This is the Lucifer effect, as described by Philip Zimbardo. Good people do monstrous things when they believe they are fighting an absolute evil. We sacrificed our privacy, our sanity, and our ethics on the altar of national security. By the 1980s, the human element was being removed entirely. Decisions were being handed over to algorithms. The Soviet perimeter system was designed to launch everything even if every Russian leader was dead. A suicide pact written in Koblenz. This is the sublime, as Immanuel Kant described it, a feeling of awe mixed with terror at something so vast it defies human understanding. We had created a god of destruction, and we were its mere maintenance crew. The collective psyche was reaching a breaking point. You can only live in a pre-apocalyptic state for so long before you start to crave the end. In psychology, this is nihilistic defensive coping. If the world is going to end tomorrow, nothing matters today. Then, the unthinkable happened. The wall didn't fall because of a bomb. It fell because of a mental shift. When people stop being afraid, the machinery of fear collapses. Power, as we know it, is an illusion maintained by the consent of the terrified. 1991. The Soviet Union dissolves. The great enemy is gone. The Cold War is over. Or is it? Third reversal. The Cold War didn't end. It was internalized. The external wall became a digital one. We no longer fear the bomb. We fear the other. We fear the algorithm. We fear being cancelled or deleted. The psychological infrastructure of the Cold War, the paranoia, the us, the surveillance, it all just moved into our pockets. We are still living in the architecture of fear. We just changed the wallpaper. So, what is the lesson of this 40-year experiment in human madness? It's that fear is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you treat someone like an enemy, they have no choice but to become one. The only thing that saved us wasn't strategy or strength. It was the occasional, inconvenient appearance of empathy. Like Stanislav Petrov, he wasn't a hero of the state. He was a hero of the gut. He chose to believe in a glitch rather than a war. He chose the human over the machine. In the grand history of power, it's always the glass gears, the fragile human moments that stop the machine from grinding us to dust. The Cold War was the greatest psychological test in history, and we didn't pass it. We just survived it. Today, the names have changed. The ideologies have shifted, but the amygdala is still in charge. We still live in a zero-sum world. We still use the Madman Strategy in our politics and our personal lives. The mutually assured fear has become mutually assured distraction. Can we break the cycle? Can we move beyond the Abilene Paradox? Only if we realize that the enemy is not across the ocean. The enemy is the part of our brain that needs an enemy to feel safe. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Paranoia cannot drive out paranoia. Only truth can do that. This has been a post-mortem of the 20th century. A study of what happens when fear becomes the ultimate sovereign. You are watching Psyche of Power. If you found this deep dive into the shadows of history valuable, you know what to do. Don't just follow the script. Question the fear. Break the de-individuation. Because the next time the sirens scream start, there might not be a Stanislav Petrov to say no. Is the Cold War over, or are we just in a long thaw? Stay sharp, stay human. Power is a game, but your mind is the board. Psyche of Power. Out.